And so I have some concerns as to whether this plan could really get anywhere. As Carl has accurately pointed out, it didn't seem to have any of the input of the major players, the Europeans, nor of the Ukrainians. So I think it's the idea of bringing people together at this point over something that's really in a very kind of a stage where no one really knows what it's about, I think would be a terrible mistake.
So, Carl, obviously this has huge implications for Europe, right? I mean, this is a war fought in Europe. And for 4 years, Europeans, along with Ukrainians, have been trying to hold the line against further Russian threats. Particularly if it gets all its demands met on the Ukrainian battlefield. And you know, Ukrainian independence and sovereignty are also at stake. You have recently, and we spoke in the summer, went to Dayton for a 30th year anniversary of what you all accomplished back then. What did you come back with? What made you, remember what you all did in the hard slog of negotiations compared to what's happening, on this, around what doesn't seem to be a peace table regarding Russia-Ukraine?
I think two things should be pointed out. The first one is that prior to going to Dayton, we had a ceasefire. And that was not entirely easy to get, but it was absolutely essential to stop the guns firing before you had the leaders sit down and do the final agreement. So that should be the focus of attempts in Ukraine now, get a ceasefire, and then the politics after. The second is, as Chris pointed out, that prior to the 3 weeks at the Dayton, at the airbase there had been a process for X numbers of peace plans, and there had been agreement on some of the key parameters and principles of the deal that should be done. That didn't make it easy for the 3 weeks because the devil is often in the detail. But the key issues, the parameters of peace had been agreed in negotiation prior to that, and we had a ceasefire in place. Without that, it could never have worked.
And Chris Hill, as we know, and we'll just say it again, when President Trump called for a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, Ukraine immediately accepted it, and Russia did not accept it and still hasn't accepted it. So that's one difference. But I also want to ask you, because I suppose realistically, there's going to have to be some give and take and maybe some territorial compromise by Ukraine, but would have to be negotiated. And the reason I ask you this is because I spoke to President Clinton, who led the Dayton Peace Accord process. I spoke to him a couple of years ago, and he mentioned some of the limitations in the final peace deal. Let's just listen to President Clinton.
We had a special problem in Bosnia because we couldn't make the peace without the Bosnian Serbs. And then from the beginning, either a hardline Serbian government or their Russian sponsors were always pushing for paralysis. They're still way better off than they were when they were slaughtering each other in massive numbers. But, I hope that'll be resolved someday.
Obviously, I was speaking to him actually in a perfect environment because you saw the two prime ministers of Britain and Ireland. It was about the anniversary of the Northern Ireland Good Friday Peace Accord. So they were talking about the hard slog of how you resolve these incredibly long and difficult wars. So take what President Clinton said, Ambassador Hill, that they had to deal with the recalcitrance and also the Russian influence against a peace deal, influencing the Serbs when it came to Bosnia. And it's very similar to what's happening now regarding Russia and Ukraine.
First of all, I just want to say on the issue of a ceasefire, the reason it worked in Dayton was everyone knew what the peace was going to be. And so the ceasefire came naturally as something you would do before you sat down because everyone knew where it was going and no one wants to be the last person to die in a war. So that worked. The problem here is no one really knows where we're heading on this. Bosnia, I think, had the added complexity of several sides, and of course, on the Serbian side, who could speak for the Serbs, and that's where we got a situation where Milosevic could speak for all the Serbs, including the Serbs in Bosnia. That may not sound ideal, but we really needed some one-stop shopping in terms of dealing with the Serbs, and so we were able to get that from Milosevic, not because we liked him, but because it made the difficult negotiation something that we could actually solve. But to President Clinton's point, there's no question we stopped a war that had gone on for years, had claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of civilians, and we stopped that. And at a certain point, the parties, and this goes up to today, are going to have to do a much better job of talking to each other and working things out together rather than tattletaling to the great powers. So I think we're at a phase now where they can talk, they should be able to talk together. I would say the Ukraine situation is far from that.